Welcome back to History Otherwise, where we explore the paths not taken in history.
It is a pleasure to be here.
Today, we have a really special deep dive prepared. We've been reading through a fascinating stack of alternate history narratives, historical fact sheets, and socioeconomic analyses that all center on one terrified decision made by a king in 1832.
You're right to focus on the fear. I mean, we often look back at the Victorian era as this inevitable, almost stuffy period of progress.
Right, steam trains, top hats.
Exactly. The sun never setting on the empire. But the sources we're looking at today argue that the whole thing was, hanging by a thread.
It's the butterfly effect, but with bayonets. The premise of the material we're covering is simple, but frankly chilling. What if the Great Reform Act of 1832 had failed? In the history books on our shelves, this act was the moment Britain decided to evolve peacefully. But today, we're looking at the alternative.
We are. And to keep this organized, because there was a lot of dense material here, we're going to break this deep dive down into three distinct acts. First, we'll look at the refusal of the king to compromise and the violent insurrection that follows.
And then?
Second, we'll explore the empire of order that rises from the ashes. A militarized, authoritarian Britain under the Duke of Wellington.
And finally, we'll look at the slow, painful decay of that brittle empire leading up to a catastrophic collapse in 1917.
It's a story of how a refusal to bend leads, inevitably, to a break. A tragedy in three parts.
So to understand that first part, we have to go back to May 1832. You mentioned just how close to the edge Britain actually was.
Yeah, incredibly close.
The days of May, I was reading through the background notes, and the situation seemed absolutely desperate. But for our listeners who, haven't brushed up on their 19th century parliamentary history recently, can you set the stage for us? What was the fight actually about?
Sure. So the political system in Britain at the time was, to put it mildly, broken. You had these things called rotten boroughs.
Ah, yes, the rotten boroughs.
These were parliamentary seats that had almost no people living in them. Sometimes literally a sheep farm and a stone wall, but they still got to send a member of parliament to London.
Usually handpicked by a wealthy lord, I assume?
Of course.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, you have these massive new cities like Manchester and Birmingham, which are just exploding with the Industrial Revolution, packed with hundreds of thousands of people.
And they had how many MPs?
Zero representation. None. Not a single voice.
Wow.
So the Whig government, led by Earl Grey, proposed a reform bill to fix this, to give the vote to the middle class and get rid of those rotten boroughs. The House of Commons passed it, but the House of Lords, the aristocracy, blocked it.
And not just once.
Repeatedly.
So this is the standoff. The Prime Minister, Earl Grey, goes to King William IV and says, Your Majesty, the only way to pass this bill is if you create a whole bunch of new peers, new lords who will vote for it. You need to swamp the opposition.
He asked the king to stack the deck. Exactly. Now, in the history we know, King William blinked. He hated the idea, but he was terrified of a revolution if he said no. So he agreed, the lords got scared, and they let the bill pass.
But in the timeline we are analyzing today, the king makes a different choice.
He refuses.
Just a flat no.
Point blank. The source material really highlights his internal monologue here. He believes that if he creates peers just to pass a law, he is destroying the independence of the House of Lords. He sees it as a revolutionary act in itself.
So for him, it's about the Constitution.
In his mind, yes, it would turn the crown into a rubber stamp. So he digs his heels in,
Earl Grey
resigns immediately. The government collapses.
So now you have a country that's already starving, angry, demanding a vote, and the king has just told them, no, the streets are filling up, the king needs to restore order, and fast. Who does he turn to?
Well, there's really only one man for a job that ugly. The king summons Arthur Goseley, the Duke of Wellington.
The Iron Duke, the man who defeated Napoleon at Waterloo.
The very same.
Yeah.
And this is the critical pivot point. Wellington was a brilliant general, but, he was a terrible politician. He didn't view the protesters as citizens with a grievance.
How did he see them?
He viewed them as a mutinous army. To him, reform was just a polite word for revolution. And you don't negotiate with revolution. You crush it.
The sources mention a specific protest tactic called to stop the Duke, go for gold. That was a run on the banks, right?
Yes. The middle-class organizers tried to hit the government in the wallet. They urged everyone to withdraw their gold from the Bank of England to force Wellington to resign. In reality, this actually worked.
But here,
in this alternate timeline, Wellington looks at the financial panic and simply doesn't care. He ignores the bankers. He ignores the money men
He
completely.
just powers through it.
He forms a cabinet of hardline anti-reformers. He essentially decides that if the economy crashes, so be it, as long as the hierarchy remains.
And that must be the moment the public realizes that peaceful protest is dead.
Precisely. When you remove that safety valve of parliamentary hope, the pressure has to go somewhere. The news hits Birmingham and Manchester, and the response is instantaneous. The Birmingham Political Union, which was this very disciplined, peaceful organization, it just shifts gears.
How so?
They declare themselves a committee of public safety.
That's a French Revolution term. That's fighting talk.
It is. Barricades go up at Newhall Hill. But the most visceral moment in the narrative happens in London. A mob descends on Apsley House, Wellington's residence.
I remember reading this scene in the source text. It's terrifying. In the real history, they threw some stones and broke a few windows. But here...
Here, the sheer anger boils over. The new Metropolitan Police are completely overwhelmed. The mob smashes through the iron gates. They storm the ground floor. It's a total violation.
tearing down tapestries, smashing busts of him.
And Wellington is inside. For him, this confirms everything. This isn't politics. This is war. He bypasses the civilian magistrates. He issues direct orders to the army.
And he recalls hardened regiments from Ireland, doesn't he?
He does. And this is what the sources call the Great Revolt, which is a short, bloody affair.
We're talking about cannon in the streets.
Grape shot fired into crowds in Manchester. Cavalry charges in Birmingham. It's Peterloo on a national scale. The revolt is crushed with absolute brutality.
And the aftermath.
Executions. Mass transportation to the penal colonies in Australia. The leaders of the reform movement aren't debated in Parliament. They're hanged or exiled.
So the dust settles, the blood is scrubbed off the cobblestones, and the Reform Act is dead.
This moves us into the second part of our deep dive. The sources call it the Empire of Order.
It's a chilling phrase, isn't it?
It is, because life goes on, but it's different. It's quieter.
It's the silence of repression. Wellington and his successors built a state dedicated to one thing, preventing that spark from ever catching again. They expand the Six Acts, which were these laws that essentially ban public meetings and clamp down on the press.
So no free speech, no gathering to talk politics, none. And the landscape physically changes. The government builds massive barracks overlooking the industrial cities. They are literally fortresses designed to turn their guns inward on the workers.
The message is clear.
The state does not fear your arguments, it only fears your force. And it has more force than you.
It sounds like a police state.
It effectively is. Radicalism is driven underground. Secret societies replace open debate. People stop talking in pubs because there are spies and informers everywhere.
One of the most fascinating whooples in this timeline concerns the monarchy itself. We think of Queen Victoria as this constitutional figure.
Right, who let Parliament run the show.
But she comes to the throne in 1837, right in the middle of this crackdown.
Exactly. And think about who her mentor is. In the world we know, it was Lord Melbourne, a charming, liberal aristocrat who taught her how to be a constitutional monarch. But here, her mentor is the Iron Duke.
So she's raised by the general who crushed the revolt.
She learns that the crown is a weapon of command. She becomes the Iron Queen. And when she marries Prince Albert, his German background, well, instead of Christmas trees, it's channeled into building a Prussian-style centralized bureaucracy.
There's a specific visual in the source material that really stuck with me, the Great Exhibition of 1851.
Oh, this is the perfect metaphor for the whole timeline.
In reality, it was the Crystal Palace. Glass and light. It showed off pottery, textiles, machinery. It was a celebration of free trade and peace.
Peace, love, and commerce.
But in this timeline, it's called the Great Exhibition of Order and Empire.
And just try to picture it. Instead of a glass palace, the sources describe a fortress of granite and iron built in Hyde Park. And inside, it's not pottery.
It's weapons.
It's the latest artillery from the Woolwich Arsenal.
Yeah.
It's models of colonial fortifications. It's not designed to charm the world. It's designed to intimidate it.
Look at our big guns.
No. Look at what happens if you step out of line. And that philosophy applies to the whole planet. This empire of order completely rejects the idea of letting colonies govern themselves.
Responsible government, that was the concept, right? The seed of the modern Commonwealth.
Yes. In the 1840s, places like Canada started asking for a say in their own laws. In reality, Britain sent Lord Durham, who wrote a report saying, let them have it, or we'll lose them like America.
But the Iron Duke doesn't do self-government.
Not a chance. So when Canada rebels,
Rushed.
ruled by a military governor-general, no parliament.
And Australia.
The sources are very dark on Australia. It never really transitions to a civil society. The gold fields are seized by the crown. The whole continent is treated as a vast open-air prison and resource extraction zone.
And India presumably is even worse.
After the Mutiny of 1857, which is even bloodier in this timeline, India becomes a pure military occupation. They govern by what they call the right of conquest.
It sounds formidable. You have this massive granite-faced empire spanning the globe. But the sources suggest that this strength was actually an illusion. This brings us to the third act, the decay.
It's the paradox of authoritarianism. It looks strong on the outside, all those soldiers and parades, but it's rotting on the inside.
And the rot starts with the economy. We need to talk about the Corn Laws. Can you explain just simply why these laws were such a disaster?
Sure. The Corn Laws were basically a tax on imported grain. They kept the price of foreign wheat high, which meant British bread was incredibly expensive.
Great for the landowning aristocrats.
Terrible for the factory workers who spent almost all their wages just trying to eat.
In reality, Britain repealed these laws in 1846 because the middle class forced the government to do it.
But here, there is no middle class power. The aristocracy has total control. So the Corn Laws stay. Bread stays expensive. The people are hungry. The hungry 40s never really end.
And hunger drives unrest. The notes mention a British Spring in 1848.
1848 was the year of revolutions all across Europe. In reality, Britain mostly skipped it because we had that safety valve of reform. But here, it explodes. It's essentially a civil war. They call them the British Jacobins.
Is it suppressed?
It is eventually, but it breaks the psychological back of the nation.
But there's a deeper problem than just riots. The sources discuss something called the innovation gap. This was a really interesting insight.
It is. It's the economic cost of fascism. You see, when you ban free speech and you crush the universities and you have spies in the pubs, you don't just stop revolution. You stop thinking.
Right. Smart people, engineers, scientists, inventors, they don't want to work for a government that might shoot them.
They leave. They go to America or they go to a newly unifying Germany. So while this authoritarian Britain is obsessing over building better bayonets, German and American engineers are inventing the telephone, the internal combustion engine.
So Britain becomes a feudal society with factories.
A technological backwater. By the 1870s, German industry completely eclipses Britain. The Royal Navy is still huge, but the ships are becoming obsolete because the aristocracy refuses to pay the taxes needed to modernize them.
Which sets the stage for the final shock, the ultimate stress test. 1914.
The Great War.
This part of the timeline feels inevitable. A brittle, isolated, technologically backward Britain gets dragged into a world war.
And it falls apart almost immediately. Think about it. War in the 20th century requires mass mobilization. You need the whole population to rally around the flag.
But how do you ask a coal miner to die for a country that treats him like a criminal?
You can't. They try. They introduced conscription in 1914, and it triggers immediate riots. The officer class is drawn exclusively from the gentry, and they despise their own men. Morale is non-existent.
And the Navy, the pride of the empire.
It fails. It can't stop the German U-boats. Starvation sets in much faster than in our timeline because the economy was already so weak.
So we arrive at 1917. In our history books, 1917 is the year the Russian Empire collapsed. The Tsar fell.
In this timeline, it's Britain.
Walk us through that final collapse.
It's a perfect storm. There's a failed offensive in Flanders. Thousands of dead for zero gain. Then bread riots break out in Sheffield. And the soldiers, they just stop.
You mute me.
It starts in the trenches and spreads to the garrisons at home. The soldiers refuse to fire on the rioters. In the industrial cities, the workers form Soviets councils to run things.
And the source material leaves us with this haunting final image.
The royal family fleeing London under cover of darkness, and the provisional government of the British Republic being declared from the steps of a burning Buckingham Palace.
The empire just disintegrates.
Instantly. Ireland, Scotland, India, they all break away. It's total systemic collapse. A century of order ends in a week of anarchy.
It is a terrifying end to the story. Just total disintegration.
It is.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's shake that off. Let's come back to the real world. Step back to May 1832.
Happily.
Because none of this happened.
No. In reality, King William IV blinked. He swallowed his pride. He promised to create the peers. The House of Lords saw the writing on the wall and abstained. The Reform Act passed.
And that brings us to the reflection point of this deep dive, the so what of it all. Because we complain about politics, we complain about compromise, we hate how slow change feels.
We do. Reform is boring. It's frustrating. It feels like half measures. But the alternative, the rigidity of the Iron Duke's Britain, shows us the value of that boredom.
The safety valve.
Exactly. The real Reform Act was not perfect. It was actually quite conservative. It didn't give the vote to the working class or women, but it established a principle. The system can bend.
And because it bent in 1832.
It could bend again in 1867 and again in 1884. It meant that the Chartists and the suffragettes could eventually win without having to burn the palace down.
That is the price of peace. A system that cannot bend will eventually break.
And as we saw in our timeline today, when it breaks, it takes everything down with it.
It's amazing to think that the modern world liberal democracy, the peaceful transition of power, was preserved by a scared king making a decision he hated just to avoid a fight.
Because history might have turned otherwise.
That is a powerful thought to end on. A huge thank you for guiding us through this terrifying alternate reality.
Thank you. It's a good reminder to appreciate the slow work of reform.
Absolutely. And thank you to you, the listener, for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time on History Otherwise.